introduction and then
Okay. We're already in.
All right.
Okay.
Today's date is February 12th, 2006, and we're talking to Sergeant Robert Anthony Fife. My name is Stephen Fife Adams. I'm Robert's son-in-law, and I'll be interviewing with Eastern Michigan University. And manning the camera behind me is Otis Whitehead, also from EMU, and we're doing this interview in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I guess just start out with the basics. You fought in Korea.
Yes.
And what period of the war? It was toward the end of the war?
I was there for the last 6 months of the war.
Okay.
So I was there when it ended.
Yeah.
In fact, we were online when it ended. They gave us instructions to stop all action shooting at, I forget what hour it was, some hour in the evening, and it was kind of strange. There was firing and shooting going on all day.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a tank unit, so we didn't go up on line that day. We stayed behind the hill, and actually we sat under the tank and drank beer all day. And we didn't want to go up there and be the last ones.
The last ones to the last casualties.
But some of the guys stayed up in the trenches all day shooting, and sure enough, come the hour, designated hour, it was very quiet and was very eerie. So we all went up on the front line, and we saw the North Koreans, Chinese. They were all over in their area. They started yelling to us. They had loudspeakers on. They wanted us to come over and have wine with them, but
Did you take
some of
them
us
up on
were a
it?
little angry about that.
Yeah.
And that's how it ended. It just was, it was over with that quickly.
Yeah.
So we pulled our tanks back. The next day we went up and we cleaned up the shells we'd throw them out the hatch after firing, and there was piles of them in different areas where we parked our tanks, and that's how we ended cleaning up the line.
Yeah.
They were over there cleaning up bodies, which wasn't very pleasant.
Yeah.
There was a lot of because they kept storming up on our lines, and a lot of them were buried in our trenches, and they had to dig them out.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, let's rewind a little bit to the beginning. What was happening in your life at the time you enlisted with the Marines?
Yes, I did.
What was happening?
I was. I think I needed something at that time in my life, and I was kind of a lost soul. I was living by myself. My father and I didn't get along very well, and I was living in a rooming house, and I was actually trying to finish high school, and I was working the second shift at Union Carbide in Cleveland, and I wasn't doing well at anything. I wasn't doing well in school. I was late for work a lot. I had too many absentees, and so I just walked into the Marine recruiting depot one day, office, and I told them I was going to enlist. They all got a big chuckle out of that because I had talked to these guys before in the registration office for the draft, where I registered for the draft, was just down the hall from them at the federal building in Cleveland, and I had some communication with them. They were in the office once, and I was down there, and another time I had to go down for something else. I talked to them again, so they said, "Well, we finally got you." But anyway, I enjoyed them. They seemed really upfront about things, and they signed me up, and that was it.
Did you know you were going to Korea when you signed up? I mean, was that?
That was I was put in a replacement command after boot camp, and but what happened is they pulled us out of that group. It was a school battalion I was in down at Camp Delmar and part of Camp Pendleton, and they they disbanded the program I was in, which was a track vehicle mechanic school, and they said they didn't need mechanics in that area anymore, so they sent us, they broke the class up, and they sent some of us, some went to the infantry, some went to other places, and a handful of us were sent to to a tank battalion that was down in Camp Pendleton, which was part of the 3rd Marine Division. And we were in the 3rd Tank Battalion. And there we received tank training and all, all that. And it was a permanent division there. And I was restless and didn't want to stay there, so I kept asking for a transfer and made the first sergeant angry. And one day the word came out, they called some of us out of ranks in the morning, and after morning roll call, and they told us to pack our sea bags. We were heading out to Korea, and that's what we did.
Was it
for some
the
of us,
same
it was
day kind of thing?
It was an adventure.
Yeah.
But I can remember we were on board ship, and there was a couple other guys there with me, and we kind of looked at each other and said, "Were we nuts or what?" We're heading over to Korea now, and we got what we asked for, and I have no regrets doing that. It was a learning experience for me. Yeah. I learned a lot over there about myself and about things in general.
Yeah.
But in joining the Marine Corps, I didn't know what I was going to get. I didn't know what I was in for, and it was good for me. It was a good experience. I never regret those 3 years that I put in, and I've recommended a lot of young men that I've met in the past that they were struggling, that they ought to consider the military, and I like the Marine Corps. I think they do some marvelous training individually.
Can you talk about the training, like the boot camp? And
yeah, it was good. It just made you kind of aware of yourself, of what your capabilities are. And
did you struggle at first?
Oh yeah, because I didn't like being told what to do, and you have to learn to take orders, and you have to learn to respond. And if you get angry about that, they see that in you. And I was pushed to the limit a couple of times. Once the drill instructor was on me about some minor thing, and I guess I didn't realize this, but I would bristle. I would get all red in the face if he came at me, and he saw that, and he kept poking at me to see if he could get me to blow up, that would tell him something about me. And I was ready to take a swing at him one day, and he really made me mad.
What was he saying? Do you remember what he was?
Oh, well, he would. They would push you around a little bit. Today, I don't think they're allowed to touch the troops, but they used to punch us and things like that. And if I wasn't standing with my feet exactly in the right position, he would kick them into place. Your feet had to be at a certain angle, and he would kick them, and that used to really make me mad. Or if my arm was out when we were doing the manual of arms, and not holding it, the rifle correctly, he would punch you in the arm and put it into place. And so I guess I would get quite angry about that. And so the one time I got all red in the face, I guess, and he said, "You don't like it when I touch you, do you, big boy?" And he was on me like that. And I said I didn't have any choice in the matter, and he corrected me and said I had plenty of choice. And so he snatched the rifle out of my hand and pushed. We were in the barracks doing this, and probably 2 o'clock in the morning. See, that's when they used to chase you out of the stack sometimes to give you a little edge and make you do the manual of arms. And he had offered to go out back with me, and I had my fist doubled up, and I was ready to give him a poke, and I don't know, something told me don't do that, and I'm not sure what it was, but I backed off, and he said, "I'm glad to see you have more sense than that," and he never bothered me after that again. And I honestly think, I've thought about that moment a lot, and I think that was a test. And he tested me, and I didn't fail him. And he walked away from me, and he never bothered me much after that. And I thought that was curious. I didn't think about it at the time, but later years I, thought about that.
Yeah. That's cool.
So the Marine Corps was good for me.
Yeah. What did your family think about you doing this?
Well,
Your
my
sisters
dad kind of liked me going in the military because he had spent some years in the English Army. He was from Scotland, and he I guess he was kind of proud when he saw me walk away. You know, I came home. It was a short-lived experience for him, my being in the military, because after boot camp, when I came home, he had a heart attack actually was in the hospital when I got home on leave, and he was released. I was home for a 30-day leave, and then I was going to California, and then from there I'll be shipped out to Korea. And so he had another heart attack before I left, and died. So he didn't really get to see me too much in my military career.
Mm-hmm. But he saw what way you were going, so.
Yeah, I think he was kind of pleased with that. Yeah, and I don't think my sister, of course, she liked the idea of having her little brother being a Marine, I guess.
Yeah.
It was, and I went and visited my younger sister, who was still in school. She was going to Andrews School in Cleveland, and she was kind of thrilled to parade me around with all their girlfriends there.
Yeah.
They all thought this was pretty. I thought that was pretty neat too, because they were nice looking girls, most of them.
Yeah. So, what was you mentioned on your way to Korea, you were looking at the other guys and saying, "What are we doing here?" Were you seriously anxious, or was it kind of?
No,
you just kind of?
The other guys chided us because we had asked for it, and
Yeah.
they said, "You guys didn't have to be here," So
Yeah.
we were kind of joking with each other. There was a lot of anxiety on the ship, but it was a long, it was a board a troop ship, and it was a long ride over there. We stopped in Japan on the way, took some of the relief off, and then we headed into Korea.
Yeah.
And things were going pretty hot over there in the war, because I think they were looking at signing the armistice or signing a truce in Panmunjom, and the North was pushing as hard as they could to push us off the line that we were, and I think we were trying to hold a particular line, which was just around that 38th parallel, and so they pushed really hard, and so we had a lot of activity when I went over there that last 6 months.
Yeah. You were in a tank.
Yes, I was in the tank battalion, the 1st Tank Battalion of the 1st Marine Division.
Before I get into the tank, when you got to Korea, did you have expectations of what it was going to be like when you got there, and how did it?
We landed in the ship pulled into Incheon, and we unloaded there, and we were in replacement commands, and it was all mixture of different groups. And so those of us that were going to a tank battalion, they pulled us out, and we were handled separately. Infantry was separated out, and they took them. Some of them they loaded on helicopters and took them right up to the line, because I think they needed them. I kind of felt for those guys, because they didn't have a chance to really get acclimated to being in that country. And so those of us who were headed for the armored groups they took us in trucks, and we stayed in that area that night, and then the next morning we headed up to our units, and They didn't put us right in tanks. They first put us working in the headquarters company, and for a couple of weeks, I think it was just to get us used to being around there. They were pretty good about that, and they assigned us to all kind of different tasks. I can remember they took us on. We were building bunkers, and for the tankers to use up on line, and we went up there and we were filling sandbags, and so I can remember filling these sandbags, and every once in a while mortars would whistle overhead, and that kind of got us all very nervous. We were all hitting the deck every time we'd hear a whistle like that, and some of the old salts were laughing at us because they didn't react quite as dramatically as we did. And I can remember asking one of them, where are we anyway? I said, where's the front line? Yeah. And he pointed to a little ridge not too far away, and he said, that's it right there. So I got a different feeling about that then. Yeah. I had a couple, I said I wanted to go up there, so they took us up into the trench, and we got a little bit of a peek at what was out there. It was rather desolate no man's land. There was absolutely nothing green in it. It was all, and it was strewn with barbed wire and all kind of stuff. And there was nothing in that area between their front line and our front line. Yeah. And the tanks would use, they actually had emplacements. They would pull up on the line, and the Dozer tank would cut a slot in the top of the hill for you. So you'd pull up there, and your the body of the tank was not visible. All that remained up above the dirt was the turret, so that you could swing it around. So it was kind of a small target then for them. But they didn't have very good air support at that time. The North didn't, and their tanks were we hardly ever saw them. So mostly what they were doing was shooting artillery at us, mortars and things like that. And, you know, if they hit your vehicle, it could do some damage, but we were protected in them. So we got hit a number of times.
You got hit? Like your tank got hit?
Yeah, mortars would hit it, and it would blow things off, like the sponson boxes or equipment that we had on them, and make big chars on them. One time it jammed our turret to the side because it hit down at near the race ring, and it caused the turret to be stuck off to the side, so we couldn't stay there. We had to pull back and go back and get it repaired. But
what time of year did you get there? Was this winter?
It was, let's see, it ended in July, so this was late winter. Yeah. It was still cold.
Really cold?
Yeah. And come spring it was pretty good, but we saw a lot of rain, you know, and that. Summertime it was hot, muggy, but
I've heard that, or read.
They had big swings in the weather there, I thought. You know.
I've read that Korea has a particular smell to it. Did you experience that?
Yeah, the smell was. We thought that was pretty incredible. I can remember in Incheon when we first landed, we were walking with our gear down to with our packs and rifles down to the tent area where we were going to stay, and we were walking along this one road, and the stink was just awful. And they told us, well, that's the rice paddies there. And they used, apparently they used the human waste to fertilize the rice paddies, and it was pretty rough. Luckily, up above, they had a demilitarized zone where there was no civilians or not a demilitarized zone, but there was no civilians allowed in certain areas, so there wasn't any farming going on where we were. The rice paddies were all dried out, and you know, where we had our headquarters and everything.
Was Incheon still mostly rubble from the invasion?
Seoul was too. I'd been down there a number of times. On Liberty, we would come off the line, and they would let us take a day off, and we'd go down to Seoul. But
what was Seoul like?
It was just a shell of a city, you know. Really, it was buildings, but there wasn't much. And most of the guys would go down there have something to drink, and was a lot of guys look for women, look for
Yeah.
the prostitutes, and that was
Was that pretty much the entertainment?
that was the entertainment.
Yeah.
They told us don't eat their food because of the, or don't drink their water because
Yeah.
you'll get dysentery from it.
Yeah. What did you eat? You ate sea rations, right? I mean, is that
Pretty much when we were in the headquarters, when we had our vehicles being back for maintenance, we lived in the headquarters area, and they made hot chow. They had hot chow lines
Yeah.
there, which was typical Army military food. And but up on line, we always ate sea rations,
Yeah.
and I didn't mind them. It was decent food.
Yeah.
I mean, it was edible. We used to heat them up on the tank. We'd run the tank and we'd hold the can of sea rations with a pair of pliers at the exhaust, and would heat that can up pretty good.
Yeah.
You'd watch until it bulged, and then we would open it up. And
Yeah.
he had all kind of real delicacies like wieners and beans and things like that.
Haute cuisine.
Yeah. You didn't want to open some of those things like they had little hamburger patties in the can, and if you open those up beforehand, you could see all the grease in there too. It was solidified. So we would always like to heat those up first.
Yeah. So what I should have asked you this before. What was your? You said you were in the third. We had a little interruption. So yeah, what was your unit?
Yeah, I had started out in the, of course, in the training battalions, but I then was assigned to the 3rd Division in Camp Pendleton, and from there they transferred me to the 1st Division in Korea because apparently they needed more personnel over there during the war, and that's where a number of us went.
Private when you enlisted,
I was private, right.
and you wound up a sergeant.
Right, I
How
got
did
the
that
rank
happen?
pretty fast.
Yeah.
I received the 2nd stripe shortly after I was in Korea. Then after the war, I was there for about a year after the war was over, and I got the 3rd stripe during that period.
Who were some of the? Do you remember some of the people you served with? Particular people that stand out to you? Buddies that you had, or?
Yeah, there was a group that's kind of stuck together. We all went through training together, and we wound up meeting up with each other in Korea, and a couple of us weren't in the same units, but we would see each other from time to time. So
What
I
were
kept
the
in
names?
touch with these guys even after the war. A couple of them stayed in. Gary Benner stayed in, and Joe Lewick, I don't know if he stayed in or not, but we used to communicate. And the one guy that called me a number of times, and was Bob Hyatt, and he got hit just before the war was over. A mortar, they were outside their tank, and a mortar hit on top of their tank, and he got hit with shrapnel in the head, and I can remember helping them get him out of there, but he called me a couple of times. He lived out in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm not sure what prompted the calls, but anyway, it was usually some event, and he would call up and reminisce, but everything came out for him all right. He got his head all healed up. He had a plate in his head, so.
Let's, I guess, talk about the combat. So you were in a tank. What were you doing in the tank? What was your job? How many people were in there?
When you start out, when you get assigned to a crew, you usually get the low-end job that's open, and that was when they had an opening. I got switched from the headquarters group to the 1st platoon, and I was in C Company in the tank battalion. So my tank number was 1414, and that was the 1st platoon, the 4th vehicle in the 5-vehicle platoon. And first job I had was loader. but I had been trained in all positions. When you train, they teach you everything about running a tank, whether it be driving, loading, or the gunner. And when the gunner was transferred home, he went through a rotation. They moved me into the gunner slot, and that was good. I was considered a good gunner because in training I used to do very well with getting on the target right away. It was a system that they used, and I was able to get second round hits a lot of times, rather than third and fourth, where by that time they would have you in their sights.
So you'd take one shot to
Yeah,
sort
you
of gauge the distance.
Yeah, you'd
and then-
estimate, and you'd take your shot, and then you'd move. It was a system that they called burst on target, and you'd move. You had to see that in the reticle, and some guys would lose it, and they'd overmove the gun, and they would hit on the other side, and so then they would have to move it back. So it was easy to get third round hits. I mean, if you didn't get a third round hit, you were really goofing up. So.
Yeah.
I was a pretty good gunner, and I did very well in that position, and I kind of liked it. But I can remember the first time I went up on line in the tank, I was sort of terrified. I can remember pulling up, and they were showering the line with artillery, and it just was a lot of noise. And it wasn't until you got up into the action that you were trained, and you did what you had to do then, and it was you just reacted, and when the tank commander who sat behind you, whacked you on the head and said, "Get the gun ready," that was your job then, and you didn't stay scared.
Yeah, you didn't have time to.
You didn't have time to be scared then,
Yeah.
but while you were waiting, that was when you got scared. And I tell you what, it was. Those rounds hailing in over your head was frightening. And even when they would overrun you, which they did a couple of times, they had a lot of, the North had a lot of people, but very poorly armed, and they would overrun the line, and they would crawl up on top of your tanks, and they'd look in the vision block on the commander's cupola, or you'd see them looking in the periscopes, and we just decided they were pretty dumb because they didn't know what to do, and they didn't have the equipment to really disarm us. So we would just we would fire at each other in the tanks. That was one method we used, or else I'd spin the turret around and knock them off. I could feel them thumping, and they would. If you fired your gun a couple of times, they would get them away because there was a big back blast from that. So. I wouldn't say we were fearless. It's just that we were. You just reacted.
Yeah.
It was part of what you were taught to do.
Yeah. How many people were in the tank? I'm here. I've
At that time, we had
like
the
4.
patent. We had patent M46s when I was over there.
Yeah.
And I had trained on M47s also, and they were the same manning. They had 5-man crews, but we never operated with 5 men. We always only had 4 men because we really didn't need the assistant driver. They had a driver, an assistant driver. They were down in the hull in the front, and then in the turret we had the loader, the gunner, and then the commander.
How much space is there inside of?
Not a lot, and for
Yeah.
big people like myself, it was pretty cramped.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of room to move around, but it was all right.
And noisy too, right? I mean,
It was a lot of noise from the weapon, and the fumes from the rounds gave you a funny taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
If you wanted to light up, most of us were smokers in those days, and if you lit a cigarette, it was real sweet. Oh, most of us couldn't smoke. I couldn't smoke for a while after firing the gun for a while because you had this taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
It was pretty awful.
Yeah.
A lot of guys took to chewing tobacco then, or snuff, stuff like that, but
Yeah.
I didn't. I never liked that.
Did you ever have to fire a weapon other than firing the gun on the tank? Did you ever have to?
Well,
shoot a
they're
rifle?
trained. You're trained on everything. They start you out. I think they started you out shooting a .22 rifle. It was a really small weapon, and then they give you the M1 because there was a lot of guys never fired a weapon. I had fired shotguns and small bore weapons when I lived in one foster home on a farm, and so I had some firing experience there. And they had you fire the 45, and in the tank, that's your sidearm is a 45. So, but everybody has to qualify it with the M1, and we all had to become proficient at that.
Did you ever have to fire it in combat though, or?
Never did fire anything but the tank in combat. The tank has machine guns mounted on it also. There's a .50 caliber mounted on the top, but you have to be outside the vehicle to shoot that pretty much. And then in coax with the 90 millimeter weapon that was on the patent series, we could fire that at troops. So I could fire the machine gun at troops that were where it was not efficient to use a 90 millimeter weapon on them.
Yeah. What were your targets? What were usually your target? What were you firing at most of the time?
Personnel.
Really?
They would come running up the hills and so forth as you scrambling up. And when you looked across to the no man's land, we would look for their bunkers and shoot at their bunkers and shoot at where we'd see people, and then like that.
Did most of this happen at night or during the daytime?
I'd say that's when there was a lot of activity at night. They did a lot of activity at night, and we had some of the tanks, and we had one on ours for a while. They were large searchlights, and they were big, high, intense lights that we would turn on and off periodically, and that would illuminate the area, and we could see things going on. Sometimes we would catch a patrol out, and it was helpful to the infantry that were around us in the trenches. They liked us and they didn't like us. They didn't like us because we attracted. If we came up on line during the day, we would attract mortar fire in on them, and they didn't. They could just get mad when we came up.
Mm-hmm.
They'd go, get in their bunkers, and just instead of taking the beating outside like that.
Mm-hmm. This was obviously a UN effort. You were not just fighting with Americans, right? You were
Right.
Could you
Yeah.
talk about that? You were.
Well, when we first, after we were there a little while, the Marine Division was pulled off line and put in reserve, and the Turks replaced. It was a Turkish Brigade that replaced our section of the line, and they didn't have armor, and they didn't have the artillery like we did. So we had to. They didn't have support units like that. So those units stayed online with them. So we were there with the Turks for I can't remember how long that was. Maybe a month or so.
Mm.
It couldn't be much more than that. A couple of months, and so they were online during that time. The Turks were, we supported them. Then next to us there was a English division, I guess, and they had that next section of line. So we used to communicate with the Limeys, and they were a lot of fun to talk to. We'd get over with them every once in a while.
Did you talk with the Turks?
Yeah, the Turks were, it was tough because most of us couldn't understand what they were, their language, and but they liked, they seemed to be, happy fellows. They were always jolly. They laughed a lot, and I'm not sure if they were laughing at us or what, but we'd go over with them, and sometimes you could understand what they were talking about. But they really liked our automatic weapons, and so we also had on the tank. Every tank had a Thompson submachine gun, and so we would take and we would let them shoot that because they liked the automatic weapons, and they thought anything automatic was great. But
They just start shooting it?
They'd just start shooting it. They frightened us a little bit because they were rather careless with where they pointed it. But it was kind of neat. We ate with them sometimes. They'd invite us over, and they always had some kind of a stew or something, and bread, and it was different kind of food than we had, so it was kind of fun. But
I think you were saying the other night that they like to run out into the.
They loved to go out on
land.
patrol, which most of us hated to go out on patrol. I didn't like it. It was too uncertain. But they would like to go out on patrol, and they would, if they encountered the Reds over there, they would battle with them, and they had an awfully, well, I guess it was an old custom that they would, if they caught a prisoner, they would usually kill him. They didn't take prisoners, and they would cut off his ears, and that was a prize. And I thought that was just, really. And they had guys they carried the ears around with them.
Like trophies?
Yeah, as trophies. And I think this is old stuff that they did in the old days, and they still wanted to do some of that. So their officers didn't like them doing that, and they were told to stop it. And I did witness an officer whipping a guy once with his swagger stick because he found him with a pair of ears in his pocket. And they weren't supposed to be doing that anymore. But we were kind of aghast that this officer had the liberty to beat up on one of his soldiers. And most of us had remarks about what would happen to the officer. They tried that with us. Anyway.
What was your relationship with the officers?
Oh, they were pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
they were all right. It was the sergeants we interacted with mostly, like the platoon sergeant and the different sergeants in the company. They pretty ran things. The officers were there in leadership positions, but I think most of our action was with they would tell the platoon sergeant what they wanted, and he would whip us into shape and tell us what to do and where our tactic was going to be. So, in the tank platoon, they have 5 tanks. You have the heavy section, which is 1, 2, and 3, and then the light section, which is 4 and 5. And the platoon leader has the heavy section, so he would be in the one tank there, and then the platoon sergeant would be in the light section. So he's usually in number 5, and so I didn't have as much relationship with the officer as I was more with the light section all the time with the platoon sergeant.
Did you ever have to go out on patrol?
Yes.
Yeah.
We had to do our share of patrols, and
What
that
was
wasn't
like?
a lot of fun. But anyway, we did go out once. We used to carry a sawed-off shotgun, which they said was against Geneva Convention, and but it was a good tool because it could spray out a lot of shot in a hurry, and it was good for close-in stuff. And we did get in a skirmish once and had to shoot our way out of it, and the guy that was carrying the shotgun lost it, and when we dropped it, and he because it was night, and we got back, and he caught hell. Where's the shotgun? And the platoon leader made him go back out and get it.
By himself?
No, it was another guy went with him.
Okay.
Yeah, they found it. They knew about where they lost it, but they were all upset that he left the thing out there because we weren't supposed to have these. It was just a little bit of a gun, and it was. Yeah, I didn't like the patrol. I did have to go out on patrol a few times.
Did you did you see any, were there prisoners taken or anything like that? Did you have any actual contact with North Koreans?
I had very little. I saw most of the enemy that I saw were dead ones after a an overnight fight or something, it'd be around the hill that we were. And but we did see some prisoners that were taken in, and they were. I was back at headquarters once, and they brought some in, and they were taking them in for interrogation. They were so young looking. I suppose we looked young. You know, somebody else would look at us and say we look so young, but they were so young looking. They were they didn't have the uniforms that we did. You know, the equipment or anything. You know, a lot of them wore tennis shoes and things like this. I think they were terribly under equipped. Their uniforms were just these baggy looking suits that they wore.
What was your feeling about that? Like, I mean, that you were facing this woefully underarmed, undersupplied enemy, and I mean, and they're rushing up, you know, these waves coming over. It sounds like trying to push you off the line. I mean, what, even in retrospect, how does that? What do you have any sort of thoughts about that?
We pretty much just thought they were fanatical.
Yeah.
That we had talked about they must get them doped up to act like that. I don't know if they did or not. You know, to get them all hopped up to act that crazy. You know, what could drive them to charge the tanks like they did? They would just run up on there you were firing a tank at them. They would just keep coming at you. And I never could quite understand their philosophy of fighting the way they did. Now, what they seemed to do would be concentrate on a particular area of the line, and they would try to punch a hole in it. And I think that what they were, at least that's why I say that before that last months of the war, I think they were pounding the line pretty hard, trying to cause weaknesses in it for us to draw back. And there was a time when they told us they had moved our line back. They had hit that one section of the line so hard they moved it back, and somebody radioed us and told them we ought to get back, that we were now on an outpost, which was not very smart for a tank to be, because they were they would sneak up with you with bazooka type weapons. They had those weapons available, so if they could get a shot at you, they could hurt you badly. We did get one of our tanks got hit with a bazooka right in the turret, and it took the whole crew out. So it wasn't very pleasant to think about the bazooka teams coming up the hill at you.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was anyone in your platoon any casualties? I know
usually it was when we were outside the tank, though. You know, there was in our platoon we got hit a number of times with mortars, but they didn't seem to hurt the vehicle. Now, in one of the other platoons, they got hit with in a second platoon, they got hit with a bazooka and took the whole vehicle out. So that was rather serious and upset a lot of people. But the guys that got hurt in our platoon generally were outside the vehicle. Sometimes, I don't know how they did this, but we would have the vehicles down off the line, and we would be loading up, maybe to head back for a maintenance, and another vehicle was coming up to replace us there, and we would, mortars would come whizzing in, and they'd hit all around the vehicles. I don't know how they did that. They must have had spotters or something out that would call in the rounds when they'd see us out like that. But, the vehicle would get hit and cause casualties.
How long was it? Could you talk about a typical shift on duty, like how long it was, and like how when you were up on the line, how long were you there before you would get to, or were you there continually fighting for a long period of time, and then you'd back off, or were you out there for firing your gun for 4 hours, and then you'd be replaced by another platoon, or
Well,
how would that work?
what we had down behind the hill, and that was the bunkers that I talked about. We actually had bunkers down off the line that we stored ammo in, and we actually had spots in there we could, the crew could catch a couple of winks. Usually had a couple of guys would sleep at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you were on line, you didn't have a regular schedule, basically. You just, what we did is we would pull off and check the vehicle, make sure everything, check the oil, see if we needed gas. If we had needed gas, we would get some gas brought up. We had drums of gas that we'd pump in there. And if you, that's when you grabbed some chow. You just ate when you could. I didn't think I don't know. It just seemed like we'd go for sometimes days and days up there.
When did you sleep? How did you sleep?
Most of the time it was during the day. We'd catch a few winks.
Cat naps, kind of
Yeah,
thing?
cat naps a lot. We didn't have a regular schedule. It wasn't a regular schedule. It just was when you could catch a nap or something.
Yeah.
We weren't doing any the line wasn't aggressively moving forward. It was we were trying to maintain a position. And that's why during the first part of the war it was a lot different than when I was there. The first part of the war, I think there was a lot of movement north and south. They were moving north, they get pushed back. There was a lot of that. They established a position, and that's what they were trying to hold that line. And the Koreans, the North Koreans, kept pushing the line, trying to push it south.
Mm-hmm.
And we held them pretty good. The Marines didn't give in too much. The ones we always worried about was the Republic of Korea Army. They were not as tough, and they would punch a hole through their line easier. Maybe they worked on them harder. I'm not sure.
Were you in the vicinity with ROK?
They were down the line from us. No, they weren't.
So you didn't have much contact?
No.
With them? What was the sort of the mood among the men there? Was morale pretty respectable? Did people feel like they were there for a good reason? Was there not a lot of reflection like that?
I don't think we reasoned or thought about the reason for being there. I know I didn't.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what I thought that was all about.
You were there to do a job?
I was just there to do a job because I joined the Marine Corps and they said this is where this is what you have to do. And I don't know, at 18, 19-year-old, what is he really, I didn't understand a lot of the political ramifications of what was going on there. Yeah. And I don't think I was unusual. I think that was pretty much the case. We had a lot of camaraderie in our outfit. A tank crew has to. You're a very close group, and you have to be close. So we kidded each other a lot, and we had a lot of things going on that amongst the guys that where we just you had to get along. And I don't remember any of the crews where there was intense dislike. If there was, the commander would try to. That's what the platoon sergeants and that's what those leaders tried to do, is make sure you had a crew that got along, because you had to work with each other very close, and it was pretty good. I had a tank commander I really liked. We called him Groucho. His last name was Marks, Eddie Marks. He was a good guy, and he was always very fair with the work, spreading the work out amongst the crew.
Did you write letters back home while you were there?
Yeah, I used to try. I wrote to my sister, and she had introduced me to a gal, and so I used to write to this gal in Cleveland. That was another gal I used to write to. I don't know. I used to like to write letters, so. And I like getting letters from these gals. So there was another one. He was one of the guys in our outfit. He had a cousin in Massachusetts that I wrote to for a while. And
another gal.
Another gal. Yeah. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But they'd send you things once in a while, a box of cookies or something.
Yeah. How did they get up to the line?
Pardon?
How did boxes of cookies get up to the line?
You'd get them when you went back to headquarters.
Oh, okay.
You know, you'd get your mail and all that kind of stuff. They had a pretty good system because it took a long time for a letter to get from Cleveland to Korea, I'm sure. But you know, it was fun getting letters like that, reading the nonsense. And they weren't screening our letters or anything. We just, you know, it wasn't like they were censoring anything. During the Second War, I think they did a lot of that.
What did you write about? Did you just write about what was going on, or?
Oh yeah, you know, just. I guess I was trying to impress them with with the situation. But
yeah, were you prone to exaggeration, or? I guess you probably didn't need to.
I didn't need to.
Yeah.
I'd send them pictures or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, somebody always had a camera around, you know. I do have some pictures that guys took of me, and
when and where did you get the tattoo?
my tattoo. Actually, I got that when I was first down in. I don't think I was in more than about 2 months or so. I was in the training command at Camp Delmar. That's when I was going to school, and that was right near Oceanside, California. That's where the camp was, and so I went in there, and I don't know, it looked like the thing to do. I got a lot of needling from the other guys. Everybody always says, "Oh, were you drunk?" I wasn't drunk. I had a couple of beers. Of course, everybody said, "Well, that made you drunk," you know. I just went and got it, and I was sorry I got it right away afterwards because it hurt. It wasn't much fun, and they had a big bandage on it. And then I started hearing stories about how if it got infected, that it would get all ugly, and then I was worried that happened, you know. So I kept that bandage on there, and I can remember the next morning after I had the tattoo done, we were doing calisthenics, and I was doing the push-ups, and the sergeant came walking by, and he looked, and he gave me the needle, and he says, "Oh, you crazy! You had to go get tattooed." You know? But there was a lot of guys got tattooed.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty common thing. But
yeah. But we didn't do it in group, you know. Usually it was one here, one there, and I don't know. Some of the guys got goofy things. I had the bulldog with USMC under it, and I was never sorry I had it afterwards, but it wasn't that visible, you know.
You caught at least one USO show, right?
Oh yeah, they used to come over. That was kind of fun in Korea, and I know after the war was over, I did. It was in the winter, and there was one that Marilyn Monroe came, and that was the big. You know, we had to get down there early from where our camp was down to the headquarters because there was a lot of guys going to that show, and you had to take your binoculars. Some of the guys were so far away, but we had a pretty good position and could see her up on the stage. And here it is in the middle of winter, and we had cold weather gear on. I had a big parka and thermal boots and long underwear and big gloves, and here she is up there on that stage with a little black dress on with just a spaghetti top, and she had to be freezing. I'm telling you that. But anyway, she looked good, you know, and that was kind of fun.
Was she singing or?
Oh yeah, she did her little bit up there. You know, I don't know if she was ever noted for her singing voice, but she talked, and you know, and it was kind of fun. Joe DiMaggio that's when they were married, and. But we weren't much interested in Joe. She was the attraction. But that was kind of fun. But we used to have USO shows a lot, and at different times I saw other entertainers that I can't think of names offhand. Most of them were not that.
No one else memorable.
Yeah, but Marilyn was the big name that I did see when I was over there, and we had some that we gave some of those gals in one of those shows. We gave a ride in our tank and all that. That was kind of fun. By the time they got to the tank, they had cold weather gear on like we did. You know, they were pretty well covered up. So.
Oh, well. Um, how so you were in Korea, or you were there for the last 6 months? Were you,
right.
Were you in Korea then beyond the end of the war?
Right.
Or,
We
yeah.
stayed there because we did occupation there.
Yeah.
We maintained the line. I guess they still have forces over there.
Yeah.
But we stayed there, and we pulled our unit got pulled off the line, and so we were in reserve for the rest of the time that I was there.
What
So
was
it was
that?
a year.
What did that mean? Like when you were in reserve, what were you doing?
Well, then you
during
just
that
set
time?
up regular tent camps, and you started doing continuous maintenance on your vehicles. You worked on your vehicles all the time. You got into normal routine that you would do in the stateside or anywhere, and you know, you could pull Liberty and go down to Seoul and places like that. But like I said before, there wasn't much to do down there. But it was just getting away from the camp mostly. But you know, and you had to pull guard duty. Then if you were lower ranks, you had to pull KP and all that. So by that time, it got to be a regular routine. So you were pretty happy when you got rotated home. The vehicles were in good shape. We got a new CO that was more of a physical fitness guy. He started putting us through heavy workouts, running a lot, and got us back into shape. Because, quite frankly, during the war, we didn't work out a lot. During the action part of it, we sat around a lot. Whenever we had free time, we sat around, or we worked on our tanks when we had to. It was a constant battle keeping the tanks running and operating properly. One time ours caught fire, and that's when we got a new tank. It was the extinguishers didn't get the fire out in the engine compartment, and it just burned up. And that was the end of that. We were kind of happy because we got a brand new one.
Yeah.
And we had then had the fastest tank in the platoon.
Fast is good. Do you remember what day you left Korea? What that was? What do you remember? Was it someone came up to you one day and said you're going home, and then you were gone, or did you know?
Yeah, it was. No, it was planned because you had so many months to do there, and at first they were doing 1 year rotations, and then it was 15 months. And every time you started approaching it, then it went to 18 months, and so that's what I got stuck on, an 18-month rotation. And so I knew when the time was coming. They didn't keep guys after that usually, and so I then was looking forward to, being discharged from the service, because I just had 6 months to put in by that time, and they I don't know, it was in the midsummer if I remember right. About July, the first part of July, I remember packed up one day and checked out the vehicle. By that time I was tank commander, so I had 3 stripes, and I had a crew that I was running. So I checked out the tank, turned it over to someone else, and packed up, and they took us down to Incheon, and we shipped out from there. And it just was a nice ride home. And then I had 6 months to do in the States, and I spent the next 6 months in Norfolk, Virginia, so at the shipyards there.
After you were discharged, what did you have? Where did you go, and what did you do?
Well, I didn't really have a home at that point. I had no. Because when I went to go home on leave, I would usually stay at the YMCA in Cleveland, and so my sister invited me to live with her, and that's what we did. We got an upstairs of a house. It was a two-family, and so she and I rented that, and we moved in together there and set up a household, and that was kind of fun. And so I stayed with her and just started doing things that I had to do. I don't know if I'd mentioned this, but I had dropped out of high school and joined, and so I went back and finished high school, and then went to college and did that whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any trouble adjusting when you got back to not having the Marines routine, or?
Well, the only trouble I had was with the language. You had to learn to take certain words out of your vocabulary that became part of your language. And I would be sitting eating dinner with people, and I would let fly with some words that weren't very pleasant. Wasn't normal language for the group.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to speak without the four-letter words that we used a lot in the service, and I'm not sure why we did that. I guess that was something we just did.
Yeah. Do you have now, at this point, looking back, do you have any personal opinions about the war itself, about the U.S. involvement there, or have you?
I think at the time what our governments were doing was probably okay. At this point in my life and later on, I probably would have disagreed with that political stance, but for the time, I think it was okay. And it was something that they felt they had to do. I'm not sure what they gained by that. I'm not sure. I think we had lessons we never did learn in Vietnam. I think it was the same in Korea, because the Korean thing is they're still not settled over there. And maybe we should have let them settle their own differences rather than interfere with it.
Do you think we should be there now?
I think we should have. I think it's too late to do that now over there, because the two countries are so different. I think somehow or other we have to do like we did with Germany. We have to get them back together, but I'm not sure how exactly to do that in Korea. There is a wider difference between the North and South Korea countries right now than there was in Germany with the East and West. So I think that my opinion now is that we should leave those kind of countries alone, let them settle some of their own differences. If they ask for help, or if the UN decides to help, I think we should be involved with them. But I think for us to take action like that is not in our best interest anymore.
Was there any sort of feeling about the fact that it was a UN conflict, that the U.S. was operating under an umbrella rather than on its own sort of terms at the time? Did you have any sort of hear any opinions about that among your comrades, or?
I don't have any real strong remembrance of the UN being a good or a bad situation. I don't know how much they controlled what we did, or if we did what we wanted to do. I'm not sure. I think we had a large part of the share over there, and I think that was my opinion, that we did a lot of what we wanted to do, and the UN forces went along with that. I think the U.S. commanders over there were a strong part of the leadership.
Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any other sort of anecdotes or favorite stories that
I could probably think of a few, but offhand there's nothing more that I think I just had a good experience with the being in the military, and I liked it. I had really came close to making the decision to stay in for another enlistment. I remember Sergeant Johansson came at me pretty strong with trying to talk me into re-enlisting, and he came close to convincing me, but I decided to leave. I really wanted to get back and do some things, and I got it in my head that I had to get a lot of education, and they might have helped me do that. I don't know, but in retrospect, I sometimes think it wouldn't have been so bad. And then other times I'm saying, well, I'm glad I did what I did and got out when I did. But I didn't have a bad experience, and I enjoyed a lot of what I did. I saw a bit of the world, I saw a bit of the country, and it was, what the military gave me was a lot of self-confidence. I was not very, I didn't think very highly of myself, I don't think. I needed some ego building, and I think they did that, and they do a good job. Marine Corps does a good job of that, and they helped me for the rest of my my life in that regard. So I don't regret those several years I put in. I probably could have put in a few more and not regretted them. They gave me responsibility. I learned how to work with the responsibility, and they gave me, when I did well, they advanced me, and I advanced fast. I was sergeant in 2 years, and that was a pretty good time in the Marine Corps.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate the time and the questions.
Thanks. All right.